It is the most advanced marketing that you can think of. So it's all about like user journeys.
My name's Peter Sumpton, and this is the Marketing Study Lab podcast. A podcast for those that are thinking, have thought and are doing, or already have a marketing qualification. But there's a little bit of something for everyone, as we cover a whole host of marketing topics. I chat to some amazing guests, each one a superstar in their own niche. And if you have a burning marketing question already, or after this episode, get in touch, we'll chat it through. peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn. The link is in the show notes. If you'd like to leave a review on iTunes, this will really help others find this podcast and spread the marketing word. Now let's get on with today's episode. The total product concept is something that can really help you out when reviewing elements of a product that consumers may be attracted to. More of that later. But first, let's meet our guest, the wonderful Hala Taha. Hala not only has the best name in the world, but hosts the Young and Profiting podcast. Not only that, she's also Growth Marketing Operations Manager at Disney Streaming Services. But this is only part of Hala's story, from radio to running an all-female team of bloggers and working for a Fortune 50 company. Hala's passion is infectious, and from just listening to the podcast, you can tell her desire to succeed at what is in front of her makes Hala stand out from the rest. So what better person to chat to and provide a wealth of knowledge and motivation for you to nail your marketing qualification. But the first thing I wanted to know was, Hala, would you rather be young or profiting?
I think that I would rather be profiting because to me, being young really doesn't mean age. It doesn't represent age. It represents being open to learn, open to learn new things. And as far as profiting is concerned, that's really about achieving financial success, but it's also about having a good work-life balance, being happy with yourself, actually, enjoying the type of work that you do. It's not just about financial gains, but profiting, I think, is the most important piece of the title.
I think that's great, and hopefully we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about your podcast, Young and Profiting, because it's interesting to note that difference, because you hear the word profiting, you immediately think financial, but we'll get into that in a bit more detail in a little bit. So first of all, tell us your story. What's brought you to this stage of your career as the host of Young and Profiting podcast?
Sure. So I truly believe that all my experiences have led me to this point. I started my career in radio working at Hot 97. It was back when I was a junior in college, and then I pivoted into running a blog that had online radio shows on the side as one way to promote that brand. And then I did a complete 360 and I went into the business world and started a corporate career, starting at HP, and now I work at Disney. So I feel like this podcast really merges three main passions: broadcasting, blogging, and business. And that's really the high level overview, but I could definitely unpack it if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can go into a bit more detail, and then just at the end, if you can just explain in a little bit more detail what you did at HP and what you currently do at Disney, because I'm pretty sure people that are listening will be quite fascinated with somebody that actually works for Disney.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's a long story because this is a 10-year span of things.
Okay.
But I'll go into it. Okay, so I started as an intern, like I said, at Hot 97. I started in the programming department, and I moved my way up to be Angie Martinez's assistant producer. And she was huge at the time. For those of you who don't know, I think your listeners are mostly in the UK. She's known as the voice of New York, and Hot 97 is the biggest station in America. It was like if I could choose any radio station to work at, like that would be the one. Cool. So at that time, when I got the position as Angie Martinez's assistant producer, I took a break from college. I thought, I found my career. I don't need a degree. And I really thought that I dropped out of school, but in fact, it was just a break. So it was a really fun job. I met a ton of celebrities, made key relationships in the music industry. I honed my radio chops, and they used to let me record commercials, and I used to do the drops for the opening DJ sets, and so it was really cool. And on the side, I used to have online radio shows with some of the younger DJs, and there was no such thing as podcasts back then, only online radio shows, which were like a precursor to that. And we used to be like ecstatic if 50 people listened to our show. And something that I haven't really talked about publicly yet is at that time I was really into singing. I've been singing my whole life. And so I was actually like writing and recording music at that same time, working with different producers and meeting people in the industry. And aside from being a radio personality, I really wanted to be a singer. So my ultimate dream was to be like the next Angie Martinez, but also like have like a small singing career. So like, that was really my dream. And I thought that Angie would pass the baton to me eventually, because that's really how radio works. You kind of like work for really cheap, for really, or even for free for a personality or a producer. And then you kind of like take over their spot. That's how it traditionally goes in radio.
Okay.
So working at Hot 97 was like a great experience. I learned so much, how to keep up in a fast-paced environment, how to like succeed in a stressful environment. And to make a long story short, it really didn't pay well. I kind of alluded to it a bit ago. It's a sketchy industry, and now I think there's regulations. But basically, I didn't make any money when I worked there. When I was an intern, I was like an official intern. But as soon as I started becoming like Angie's assistant, like I didn't have an official job at the station, and that was normal. Like there was anybody who wanted to be like a coveted role on there. That's what you did. You had to like pay your dues. So you made your money off the station. So I used to book like showcases for upcoming artists and host showcases on the weekend. And like that's how I used to make my money at that time. So long story short, a real job opened at the station. It was to be Angie Martinez's producer. And I thought, well, hell, I've been working for free for her for 2 years. So I got it in the bag, And unfortunately, they picked somebody who worked in the video department who didn't even have experience on working on an actual show. And they picked him. Granted, he used to know how to do the delete boards. And I had some experience doing that, but he was way better than me. And he was older than me. And honestly, looking back at it, he deserved it more than me. But at the time, I was like just so like felt so insecure about not having a job on paper, even though it literally probably paid like $14 an hour. And so I kind of like made a really big mistake. I texted the guy he was asking me like what time I was coming into work. He needed me to, I think, come in early to help him like on his first day and kind of show him the ropes. And I was like, well, I don't feel like going to work today. Like deal with it on your own. And he showed that to Angie, and Angie got very mad at me. We're fine now, but she got very mad at me. And I got let go from the station, and like my key card got turned off immediately. And like that was it. I was like devastated. That was like the worst day of my life. I was like hysterically crying all day. Everybody was calling me. It was like the worst day. But like by that weekend, I literally came up with a new idea, and I said, I'm going to start the sorority of hip hop. And the idea was I was going to like elevate women in the hip hop industry, and we were going to unite together because I had felt defeated, and nobody was going to tell me that I wasn't going to succeed in this industry, and that I would, if they're not going to put me on, then I'm going to start my own thing. And literally that weekend I had that idea. So I put out solicits to Facebook, on Twitter, even Craigslist. And I promoted this idea of the sorority of hip hop. And I asked women for their bios, their pictures, their resumes. And then I like had all these inputs, and I picked out beauty and brains type of girls with industry experience in the tri-state area. And we held our first meeting like maybe the following week, and there was 12 initial girls.
So when you were doing that, were you known or sort of known in that industry to manage to communicate with these people, or was it completely start from scratch?
I was already like being at Hot 97. I got a bit of notoriety already. I used to like go to all the big parties with like the DJs in New York were famous, and I, as a result of that, got a little fame. I used to hang out with celebrities. I used to like go to all the, always be backstage at the coolest parties. Like I was really cool back then. I'm not that cool anymore, but I was like so cool back then. And so that was really it. Like I had a lot of Twitter followers already, and they used to, talk about me on the radio, like, "Oh, Hala, get us the news story. Hala, get us some coffee." Like that was the kind of stuff, but I was
Okay.
still talked about on the radio. So, um, I was like slightly famous in the area. I wouldn't say like in general. So, that's how like people were kind of elevated to me. It was like a big deal back then that I used to be Angie's assistant. Um, and yeah, so I wouldn't say I was like, big or anything, but I had a little bit of clout to kind of
Sure.
recruit these girls. So I recruited these girls, and the next step after recruiting the girls is I said we wanted to start a blog, but I really had no experience building a blog. I had blogged for DJ Enough at the station. He was another big DJ at the time, and I did that like for him for like a year or so. So like I had some experience with WordPress, but I never did it on my own, and I basically taught myself everything. I taught myself how to customize a WordPress website, set that all up, figure out hosting, graphic design. I wasn't even that great at writing. I really honed my writing skills at this time. And so basically, I just taught myself how to do everything. Like I did not learn it in school. So a month in, we became like the 30,000th most popular blog in the world, which there's millions of blogs. So we did like so good right out the gate. And that was really because we had like really cool social media tactics. Like I said, Twitter was the main platform that I was already kind of popular on. And a lot of the girls that I selected on purpose had a big Twitter following. And at one point, I think by the time we were really popular, we probably had like 25 girls, right? We did it so that every time we posted a blog, the same hashtag, we were Strawberry Blunt, the sorority of hip hop. So Strawberry Blunt hashtag would come out, and we would add the celebrity, and it would be like automatic. We put out a blog, 25 girls adding the celebrity, hashtagging, and like somebody would get basically like attacked 25 times in a row on Twitter. And then obviously like we got a lot of retweets and we got a lot of engagement. So like we were like the first blog that thought of doing that, and then every blog did that.
Great piece of practical advice is there as well in using the hashtags and people in certain industries to get that awareness.
I think now it's oversaturated, but you could do something similar in other spaces. Like Twitter isn't really like it's not the same as it was, but you might be able to do something that on LinkedIn in a similar way. I don't know exactly how, but we just like exploited what we had, and we didn't have a budget, and we just basically did like so much guerrilla marketing. That got really popular really fast. And I think the biggest thing that happened after that is that we got approached by MTV. And MTV, it was just a month in, we had online radio shows as well, and they were very interested in a show about our experiences. And so I was the president of the sorority of hip hop, and then we had like, an executive board with like a vice president and a music director and a radio director and like all these different like fake titles. And they were really interested in a show, so they shot a small pilot, and we didn't get the show, but we didn't let it get us down because we were like, it's just a month, like what's going to happen in a year? This is awesome, and it just honestly motivated us more. At the same time, I actually was offered to be on Love and Hip Hop, which is a very big reality show. It's what Cardi B started off at. She started as a reality TV show star on Love and Hip Hop and then became who she was. So this was before Cardi B was on the show, and it was kind of like a ratchet show. I was dating a hip hop producer who's still my partner, Harry Fraud, and so he's a huge hip hop producer. And so they were very interested in me being on this show because I had this popular blog and I was dating this famous hip hop producer. And I actually turned that down for the possibility of having our own show on MTV. So sometimes I look back and I'm like, well, what would have happened if I just took that, like had it in the bag, but I didn't. So that was one thing that I always look back and think, what if I had done that?
Mm.
Um, anyway, we didn't get it. And I guess you could just fast forward a couple years. We did the blog. We hosted parties, hosted concerts. We grew to like 50 girls. In total, there were probably 100 girls in the sorority of hip hop, but people were in and out, and we used to have like strict requirements. Like if you didn't meet your 12 blog minimum, you were kicked out. It was like a very like sorority-ish type thing. And then we got approached by MTV again. And this time it was very different. It was like everybody had contracts. Everybody got paid. We recorded all summer. They got us a studio on Broadway in New York that they like set up and was like so cool. And they came to my parents' house and filmed at my parents' house several times. And then the other girls, same thing. Like they like actually went into their lives and they pitched it as, this is for real. Like you guys are actually like getting the show this time. We made a mistake last time. And so we were like so excited. Like imagine this was like right off the heels of Jersey Shore. We literally thought like we finally got our big break. All this working for pennies for years in the industry, not being appreciated. And now we're going to show everyone we're going to be the next Jersey Shore. We were so pumped. And then we didn't get the show again. And it was like, again, like that moment at Hot 97 when I lost my job. It was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, and I was just so upset. And we tried to keep it alive, but it just wasn't the same. And it was really me. I started to feel like, okay, we didn't get the MTV show. I've got 50 girls who are looking to me to make their dreams come true. This is a lot of pressure and I don't think I could do this anymore. And like, that was really what was going through my head. It wasn't even about like, I believed in myself. It was more like, I feel like I'm giving these girls false hope. We keep almost getting something and we're not quite there. And you can't really monetize. Like by this time, like blogs were kind of dwindling. And I was like, okay, like you can't really make money off a blog. We tried to open up an online store. That didn't really work. And so I was just like, I need to like kind of save myself at this point. And so I stopped it. I shut it down.
Wow. Big decision.
Yeah, I shut it down. And people were going crazy. Like there was a hashtag going around, Strawberry Blunt shut down. And it was just like this bit. And the girls, I'm still not friends with some of the girls to this day. I'm friends with a lot of like the top girls that were in the group. Those are my best friends. But like some of the girls, like they hate me to this day because they're like, you stop Strawberry Blunt. Like you're terrible, And so it is what it is. They couldn't understand. Sometimes you just have to change your life and pivot your life. And sometimes there's a point in time for everything. And it's okay to just change and pivot in life. And so I did that. And I decided I was going to get my MBA, and I went back to school. I actually graduated with a 4.0, and which was a huge accomplishment for me because in my undergraduate studies, I did very poorly. And it wasn't because I wasn't smart. I was just concentrated on Hot 97 and being a cheerleader and being in plays and just doing everything. And I wasn't focused on school. So this time I was like, I really need to learn. So I got my MBA. I actually convinced the director at the program to let me in, even though I had no business being in a business school, but I proved them right. And then I actually became like president of the Alumni Association and did a lot of good things for the school. So it worked out for them and it worked out for me. And at the same time of getting my MBA, I got an internship at Hewlett Packard. And that was like financially a huge break for me because all this time I was like such a young entrepreneur, like even working at the radio station I mentioned, like I wasn't really getting a check. I was booking showcases and being a salesperson and like, always just like hustling. I was just a hustler at that time. And that was the first time like I was in a corporate setting And it was a big transition. Like I was, they hired me because they were like, oh, she's sparky, you know. But it was like a big transition because it was like a very corporate, very business, and it took me a while to kind of like acclimate. But I did well, and I ended up working at HP, starting as an intern, which they pay very well as an intern. Like it was the first time I ever like made like a nice salary as a young person, you know? And then I just moved my way up and I literally had every job in the marketing department. I was in marketing because the blog helped me hone all these marketing skills. So I started doing their social and their website management, and then I did sales and internal communications, and then I did go to market activation, which is kind of like working with all the different business groups and helping to launch solutions. And literally any job you can think of on the marketing team, I did that, and I just kept getting promoted, and it was a great experience corporate wise. And then after about 5 years, you start to feel like, first of all, in my fourth year at HP, that's when I started Yap. That was last year.
Okay.
So that's when I decided to start Yap. And really it was more like, okay, I finished my MBA. I had done my MBA for 2 full years while I was working at HP. It was already a year of just working, and I started to get bored, and I was like, I can probably do more. You know, I feel like I could handle more on my plate. So I started Young and Profiting, and the idea was to help young professionals grow financially and professionally by investigating a new topic each week and bringing on experts on the show. And so I had this idea, and I told everyone at HP. We were having like a meeting where everyone was sharing their New Year's resolutions in December. And it was literally like probably like December 15th. And I hadn't really even started the show and started like planning anything. I thought it was going to be so easy. And everybody was going around telling their New Year's resolutions. And I was like, I'm starting a podcast on January 1st. And then I said that I even wrote it on LinkedIn. I'm starting a podcast January 1st. Like, and I was like telling everybody about this, and I hadn't even started. Then it was like winter break. We got like 10 days off of work, and I thought that's when I would launch this podcast. Turns out it's way harder than that.
Yeah, sure.
And it took me months. And so I didn't end up launching the show until April, but I was still working really hard on it, but it didn't happen in 10 days like I had thought. So, yeah, I just basically the first guests on my show were Jack Schaefer, Dr. Jack Schaefer. He wrote The Like Switch, and Dory Clark. She wrote books like Stand Out, and she's like a podcast guru. She's on so many podcasts and very famous. And I basically wrote them long emails and told them my whole backstory about the blog, about Hot 97, about the fact that this is my first show, like kind of take a chance on me. And they did. And they agreed to come on my show. I was pretty rusty, I think. I had a totally different format than I do now because I was actually not comfortable doing live interviews. I thought I wasn't good enough yet and I needed more practice. And so really the show was like me narrating and kind of pre-planning and then like plugging in the vocals of the guests. And there was the first 3 episodes, there was like multiple guests per show. And I think I did that as like training wheels looking behind because I wanted my parts to sound perfect and I was scared of not sounding perfect. So I did it in that way where it was like very post-production. Now it's more of like, I prepare, we do the interview, we barely edit it and put it out, you know?
Yeah, once you get that process, it's easy to replicate. It's still hard work, don't get me wrong, but it becomes more efficient.
Yeah. So I'll just wrap up and talk about how I got into Disney.
Yeah, cool.
So, you know, I started the podcast, everything was going well. And then I basically just got recruited at Disney, and I was very happy at HP, but I felt like I had learned everything I was going to learn. And now I work at Disney, and honestly, I work at Disney streaming services specifically. And so we're launching in the fall, and it is the most advanced marketing that you can think of. So it's all about like user journeys and triggered communications and data focused, and it's really, really advanced. It's very challenging for me, but I'm learning so much, and it's just another like way for me to, I think, to expand my skill set. So I took that job, and here I am today.
Excellent. That's a brilliant, so fascinating. Your backstory is amazing. In listening to your podcast, it's clear that you're very motivated and ambitious, and that's come across in your backstory as well. Is this something that you've always been in tune with, or have you honed these skills by what I mean by motivated and ambitious? Has it always been with you?
Um, I would say that growing up, I was pretty average. I wouldn't say that I was the most motivated person in the world. I think that I was energetic. I wanted to do things, but I didn't really get a big break. And I think that something that I think was definitely to my advantage that I don't think was necessarily my fault was that in high school is when 9/11 happened. And so I was a freshman in high school, and I became very unpopular because I was Arabic. And I'm not saying that like that's like the reason why. And I wouldn't say I actually was unpopular, but I just would say that like I felt like I didn't get, like, for example, I was an amazing singer. I never got the lead in the plays. In college, anything I tried out for, I got the lead, you know? I didn't make the cheerleading team in college. I made the cheerleading team, you know? And it's just like weird things like that where like these things that probably would have shaped me or made me more outgoing or made me more motivated. It's like even I was an amazing singer. Thank God, like the chorus teacher, I always had a solo, like, so like that was always cool. But like, for example, I tried out for the talent show, and I'm a great singer. Like, I'm not trying to be cocky, but like I really am. They didn't even let me on the talent show in high school. Like, that's crazy, you know? And looking back at it, it's like that definitely affected me, and made me feel like kind of like nobody believed in me, you know? And so that was really tough. But looking back, it was probably due to some circumstances that were outside of myself and not necessarily my fault. So in college, it was way different. It was more diverse. I kind of grew up in like a rich white town. And so it was very difficult for me at that period. And then in college, it was way different. It was like sky's the limit. I was like popular. Anything I tried, like people believed in me, and like so that really like lifted up my belief in myself. And I also got really into the law of attraction. So like right before Hot 87, I had become very obsessed with the concept of the law of attraction and how if you believe it, you can achieve it. If you know, you write things down and affirmations and things like that. So I got very into like that whole positive mindset. And I think the fact that I got a little, you know, what's the word? Like not praised, but people started to actually give me opportunities.
Yeah.
That helped motivate me. Whereas I think when I was in high school, it was just hard because I'd never got even small things. Like nobody gave me a chance. So I think that's really what kind of propelled me. And then I just kind of kept it up on an upward motion after that.
Okay, so you work for Disney, you've got your podcast, and I'm guessing you've got some kind of social life somewhere in between. Time seems massively limited for everybody, particularly when speaking to you. You've got a lot going on. How do you manage your time effectively?
Yeah. So I'm really efficient with my time in the fact that I don't waste it. I don't watch TV. Literally, I've been in a new apartment for like 3 months. I literally have not turned the TV on once. Like, I don't watch TV. I'll watch movies and stuff on the weekend with my boyfriend as like a date, you know, but like, I'm not watching TV. I'm not reading up on celebrity gossip. I'm not doing that kind of stuff. Literally, if I like, my fun is working on the podcast, like that's what I'll do for fun, and it's productive, you know, and or I'll prepare for an interview or like this, like where I'm being featured on a show. So that's really how I spend my free time. Or I do something like work out, which I think mentally and physically is good for me. So like I only do like spend my time on things that are like going to do something for me. So I think that's key. I think people waste a lot of time doing silly things. And I wish I had more time for social stuff. I still get to like see my friends, but I wouldn't say that like I don't prioritize doing social things over doing something productive. And then another key proponent is that my partner Harry Fraud, he's a similar type personality, and so like we'll hang out and like still work together while we're hanging out, and like that's how we'll like spend a lot of our weekends. Is just like I'm listening to him produce music and I'm working on my podcast while he's doing that. So I think it's about like who you have in your life and the kind of influences you have, and then I think it's really also like as far as the technical piece of it is about scheduling your time. So I try to time block everything. This is advice that has come from a lot of guests on my show, and I've had top productivity experts. And basically, like you just block out time instead of just writing a to-do list or writing things down. You actually block out time on your calendar dedicated to certain things, even if it's something like, take my dog for a walk. Like plan everything. And I'm very much a planner, so I literally like plan out my whole day. I've got my schedule planned out for the next couple months. Like I know what I'm doing every single day, and so I think that helps too.
I love that mentality. It's excellent. It can be so difficult for somebody that's studying a qualification, particularly a marketing qualification, to have that full-time job and also study. But one thing I try and say to them is, okay, what happened in the latest soap opera or what's happening in celebrity land? And 9 times out of 10, somebody can tell me that, and it's like, that's where you need to study. That's the time you need to take, and instead of looking at celebrities, you need to take that time to the study. That's where you gain the time back.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So you've studied for an MBA yourself alongside a career. Did you find this a tough challenge to deal with the additional workload then? I know you said now you schedule blocks of time, but back then, was that what you were doing, or was it slightly more difficult?
No, I was always used to hustling, so it wasn't hard for me. I was used to working until midnight when I had my blog, and so that's just what I did. I would work, and then I would go home and I would study, and my classes were actually on the weekend, so that made it kind of nice, and I would just study every night and go to school on the weekend. So I didn't really have trouble with it.
Okay, cool. What are your thoughts on formal education and training as opposed to learning on the job? Because you've had experience in both, probably the opposite way to most people.
Yeah.
But you've had experience in both. So what's your thoughts on the education process as it is at the moment?
I think that you can really do it either way nowadays. I think that there's plenty of people who drop out of school, who learn skills on their own. We're in an age where anything can be Googled, anything can be YouTube. So, similar to me, I learned how to do graphic design and start websites like web management and web development from the internet. And so everything's at your fingertips now, where I don't think formal education is as necessary. But I think it's really good to teach you dedication, consistency, to give you some formal skills and make you having to attend class and get a grade. Like it kind of forces you to learn stuff. So I think that if you're the type of person who won't do it on your own, then going to school is definitely for you, because you'll be more motivated that you're spending all this money. You better make use of it, right? But if you're the type of person who like takes control of their own destiny and has the motivation, self-motivation to learn on their own, then maybe you don't need to go to college. But for me, I wanted it as a way to get into corporate. I used it as a stepping stone to get an internship in another industry. I was in radio and running a blog before, so like me, even though I had the skills, applying to corporate jobs at the time, I was getting like very low paying jobs. And then as soon as I got my MBA, it like put me in another caliber of, career. So that's also beneficial, is to just consider the fact that it's a good way to pivot into another industry.
Okay, so anyone starting or just starting a career or an actual business for that matter. What advice would you give them?
I think I would say to start with the end goal in mind and to really think about your business model. I think even today, I think my biggest mistake is that I go with the passion. I'm like, I'm passionate about this. I'm going to do it, and it's great. It always gets me far, but I think that thinking about your business model and how you're actually going to make money off something is just important on if you like doing it. So it just really depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to, be a millionaire, you need to figure out what product is going to get me to $1 million and how many items of this product do I need to sell per month to get me to this goal at this point, and I think you need to just work backwards and really think about your business model. And I also think that you need to know if you're an entrepreneur or if you're more comfortable, working in a corporate job. And I think both is okay. You can be successful doing both. You can be fulfilled doing both, but you have to really know, like, are you an entrepreneur like personality? Are you self-motivated? Are you going to be okay working all hours of the day? Or are you more of a corporate person? And if you're in corporate or have whatever kind of job, you can always have a side hustle. You don't need to just stick to one thing. Like, it's a different age now where you can have a job. If you have a computer or a phone, you can have a side hustle. So, the world is your oyster.
I love the side hustle. Hala, are you ready for some quick fire questions to wrap
Sure.
this all up? Brilliant. Name one must-read business book.
I like The Like Switch by Dr. Jack Schaefer, who was on my first podcast episode that I mentioned earlier. That is an amazing, underrated book, and I recommend it to everyone.
What was the last thing you Googled?
I had an interview yesterday with Jay Samit, so it was definitely something about him.
Excellent. What is your most used app at the moment?
LinkedIn. I am obsessed with LinkedIn. I'm on it too much, and that is definitely my most used app.
Yeah, I'm an advocate of that too. Love it. Absolutely love it. What would your one tip be for people who are studying at the moment?
Make sure you get your sleep. You are way smarter when you get a good night's rest.
And final question, what motivates you the most?
My listeners. Just people telling me that they enjoyed the show, that they found value from the show, that they look up to what we're doing at Yap. That's definitely what keeps us going every week.
Hala, you've got so much going on at the moment. So if people want to find more out about YAP, which stands for Young and Profiting, or get in touch with you, where should they go?
So you can visit youngandprofiting.com. We're on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, you name it. You can find us. Just Google Young and Profiting. On LinkedIn, you can search for my name. It's Hala Taha. That's Hala Taha. And on Instagram, we are at Young and Profiting or at Yap with Hala.
Amazing, Hala. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely fascinating to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great being here.
Hala, there's so many good pieces of advice you provided us with there. Thank you so much for coming on the Marketing Study Lab podcast. But here are my 3 takeaways from that. The first one is, don't waste your time. Take a seat. Write down your daily or weekly activities. Now look at those elements where you could be more productive and work to enhance your efficiency for getting stuff done during those periods. It could be watching the news, watching rubbish on telly, reading magazines. It could be your commute to work and how can you make that more productive? Podcast. The second one is always start with an end goal in mind and work back from there as to what needs to be achieved. This can work very well in business and also for your studies. And the final takeaway is that it's never ever too late. You can always pivot. And by pivot, we mean change the course of your future by doing something different to what you do now. The door is never shut. So if it feels right, take that chance and put one step in front of the other. Do that pivot. And finally this week, we're going to talk about total product concept. And what the heck is it? Well, the actual model and the theory behind it can be broken down into 4 key areas. All important, as I'll explain. Number 1, at the centre is the core. The core is that element of the product that is why it actually exists. And it meets the needs of a particular target market. The core benefit, if you like. The second part is the expected element. And these are things that your target market almost takes for granted. The colouring, the branding, the packaging, features, accessibility, usability, for example. Things like this that aren't the product's number 1 core benefit, but it can't be that product without it. The third element is the augmented part of the product, the bonus part, really. It's those elements that aren't unexpected but can make a difference and differentiate your product from the rest. So this could be anything from an extended guarantee, exceptional customer service, or added bonuses. Think when you buy a car and they add all those elements onto it to make it extra special. The product doesn't need these elements to exist, but your target market may thank you and remember you for providing these. And the final element is the potential element, which, as you may expect, are those facets that a product could potentially have in the future, a longer battery life, or a variety of colours, for example. This is the part where innovation and creativity can help move a product or even a company forward and ahead of its competition. So do not, whatever you do, forget that potential element, because you don't want to stagnate and you don't want your competition to get ahead of you. Thank you so much for joining us today on Marketing Study Lab. It really means the world that you're listening to this out there. And hopefully I've provided you some value. If you're looking to know more about what Marketing Study Lab does and is about, go to marketingstudylab.co.uk or get in touch with me personally, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or feel free to email me at peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Happy marketing.